Good morning.
Good morning.
It is good to be here today with you all. Welcome to Celebration. My name is John. If we haven't met yet, I'm the convener here at Valley and Mountain. And Advent is one of my favorite seasons. It's these 4 weeks, especially living in Seattle, where it gets darker and darker and darker, earlier and earlier and earlier. And Advent is like the last stand against the total consumption of playground time. So I love being in a community where we come together and we kind of have a process and a communal experience that helps me, a Florida boy, kind of resist the tendency to be very sad in a season like this. And it's not just the weather, you know, it's like things are going on in the world around us right now that could very easily, I could find myself falling into an abyss of despair. There is so much to be frustrated and angry and just kind of go off the rails in a way. The way that this tax bill is coming down right now, the way that systemic injustices and racism and sexism and all these things just continue to chug forward and even seem to gain momentum at times. So I'm glad to be in a place, in a community where we have some process, some rituals, some organizing that helps us to stand against that. This is a season and a day when we talk about hope. The theme we're doing of Advent this year, Advent means waiting or expecting or hoping or the coming, is the underground Advent. So we're looking at different ways that communities and people have found hope, have found love, have found peace, have found joy in ways that are outside the mainstream. It's hard to get outside the mainstream. So I mentioned I was from Florida earlier. I'm just going to give a short little reflection today, actually, and then we're going to have an open kind of mic time. But tell you a story first. So as I mentioned, I'm a Florida boy. I was born and raised in Tampa, and there I developed my love for hiking. As you'd expect, my dad would take me out amongst the snow-capped mountains of coastal Florida and bring our parkas. No, we actually did a lot of hiking in Florida. It's through this kind of scrub brush area. We called it like doom marches. It would be just blazing hot and miserable and no fun at all, but we did it anyway. And we were always on an itinerary. My dad was very specific. We had our packing lists in advance, and he sent them out to everybody who was going on the hikes with us, and we knew exactly where we were camping. We later started doing Appalachian Trail hikes, and he got this book that had like descriptions of every 0.1 mile, pretty much. Like at 17.2 miles, there will be a slight turn in the trail. At 17.3, there's a little trickle of stream, and we follow along. It was very specific. And so basically, he taught me how to go hiking and be outdoors, and that's what I assumed you had to do. And so after I graduated high school, me and two of my best friends, Chandler and Avishai, we hopped in a car and we decided to do a road trip across America. So we spent 5 weeks driving around to national parks and did all those kind of things. So we left Tampa, and 48 hours later, we were in the Rocky Mountains in Colorado. We were serious drivers. We had a great CD collection. And we woke up for the first hike that we were going to take together. And these guys didn't have a lot of experience hiking either, so I kind of established myself as the expert. And I'd given them packing lists. I'm sure they were so annoyed at me. Like 18-year-old dudes, and I'm like, here's your packing list for a trip. I found out later, they found it annoying, but they brought the right stuff, so whatever. We go out hiking, and we're on this trail, and I picked it out. It was like a 10-mile trail to a waterfall, and it was going to be just perfect. And we're about a half a mile down the trail, and one of them's like, hey, look at that mountain, let's go up there. And then they both start just like going off of this mountain, and there's no trail. And I'm like, guys, you can't go off the trail. That's not the mountain. We're supposed to go to this other, and there's a waterfall, and it's 10.2 miles away. And they just didn't even lift. They were just walking up this mountainside, and I didn't know what to do, and I thought it was all wrong, and I just started following. And we had to kind of scramble up this mountainside, and it took hours, but eventually we got to the top of this mountain, and we were all alone, and we were looking across this expanse of the Rocky Mountain wilderness. And I realized that the hike, the trail, was this construct that I had allowed myself to be to obey. I just embraced it. I assumed that was the only way you could hike, or something horrible would happen. Some unknown bad thing would come to pass if I went off the trail. Today, as I said, we're talking about hope. And often when we talk about hope, just in our normal daily lives, we say like, I hope that you feel better soon. And what we mean by that is like, I wish you would feel better soon. Or if I had it my way, the world would be like this. That's what we mean by hope. And it's kind of this, it's very thin. It doesn't have a lot of substance. It doesn't have a lot of oomph to it. It's just like, I wish things were like this. That's how we often use the word hope. But in theology, in Christian mysticism and liberation theology, hope is not simply a wishing or an if I had it my way. It is an act of differentiation with the way things are, with the world that has been sold to us by the powers that be. They basically say, the empire says, this is the way the world is, and there is a little bit of wiggle room, everybody, so don't get too concerned. You can change things, but these are the boundaries in which you are allowed to change things. These are the boundaries in which you're allowed to think, and these are the boundaries of imagination. Anything outside this is considered impossible, foolish, unrealistic, naive, childish, juvenile, whatever the term you want to pick. It's considered just kind of pathetic. So let's get an adult in the room who can tell us how things really are. You guys tracking this? I mean, you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. There is this, this marketing campaign by the powers that be to constrict our imaginations, to stay on the little trail that has been dictated for us by the powerful, and say that the way things are just the way things are, and there's very little room to change. So in this story, in the scripture that we have for today, it begins, for nothing is impossible with God. And I've heard people talk about this in a way that's basically like, so if you believe in God, then you have like magical powers and like everything will go your way. And of course, that's not how the world works. There's plenty of people who believe in God or who have a deep spiritual or religious background, and things don't just work out how they want them to. And it's a real dangerous thing to start telling people nothing's impossible if you believe enough, if you have enough faith, like you can control chance in the universe. It'll just like follow your beck and call because of your religious faith. That's how it's been sold, and that's a really dangerous thing to tell people. But I don't think that means we should throw out this idea and this beautiful passage of, for nothing is impossible with God. What that passage means to me is that in the divine imagination, it is so much more expansive, so much more beautiful, so much more full of joy and peace and possibility than what we allow ourselves to believe is possible. And so we don't try to do new things, because what we think is possible is so small and short and minimal. And so today I want to ask the question, where does your hope come from? Who gives you hope? Who expands your imagination? When have you been in one mindset and thought that this kind of thing was possible, and you encountered something real in the world? Some agent of the spirit of liberation of God, some follower of Jesus, somebody, something, some story that rocked your boat and that made you believe new things are possible. The first time I walked into a Catholic worker house, that happened to me. Catholic workers are these people, these like kind of deeply committed followers of Jesus who try to live like they think you would actually live, and they basically open their homes to anybody who wants to come in. People can sleep there and they can eat there, and there's usually like art of like Che Guevara and stuff on the walls. I don't really know how that fits in, but it's these beautiful places of hope and hospitality. I got really involved in one about 10 years ago, and went there once a week, and we shared a meal at a common table. And unlike the shelter where I went to and volunteered at, this was a place where there was no separation between the haves and the have-nots. We were all together, and it began to shift my idea of what was possible and what was needed in terms of changing the world, and just something as simple as food justice. I see Annette Jones in the room in the back corner there. When I come to Thanksgiving at the CoLab, it changes my view of what is possible, because it is people from all walks of life coming together and experiencing equality. This idea that we sort of talk about, and yet the world is so opposed to it. It often feels like a naive dream. I see Marcus and Mama Green over there, two people who founded a news source, the South Seattle Emerald, that's telling the authentic stories of South Seattle. It is something that is expanding possibility to me. Instead of just accepting that the Seattle Times and the big mainstream news sources get to dictate how people see our neighborhood, They give a platform to anybody. I mean, it's like a really low bar. Anybody can do it, right? Even I can do it. But because it's not just like, oh, we need some writers. It's because they believe in the people of this place, and they know that everybody has a story to tell. They know that what you're talking about, Sarah, that every individual has dignity and worth and power inside them if we would only open the doors and allow them to speak. And so people in this room are inspiring me, and I invite you to come forward and to share who inspires you, what inspires you, how has your life been changed by Underground Hope.